Somewhere between the smell of motor oil and burnt coffee, a little kid found his father. He just didn't know that's what was happening at the time. Nobody hands you a map when the person who was supposed to show up doesn't. So you learn to navigate by whoever's actually standing in the room. Imagine you're 5 years old and the biggest man you know smells like sawdust and Old Spice, and he's the one who picks you up when you fall off your bike. You don't have a word for what he is, yet you just know he's safe. And sometimes that's the whole entire world. How does a child understand a father when the concept itself is hollow, for them just a word people say, like a room you've never been inside? The answer, it turns out, is that someone else quietly furnishes that room without making a single announcement about it. Here's the part they don't put in greeting cards. Grandfathers don't always sign up to be fathers the second time around. Sometimes life just quietly drafts them. And the great ones, the ones who are truly built for it, they never once complain about the assignment. My grandfather didn't sit me down and say, "Son, I'm gonna fill a gap you don't even know you have." He just showed up at school plays, at breakfast tables, at the end of long and confusing days, and the gap started filling itself. There's a particular kind of irony in realizing the man who already raised a whole family had more patience left over for you than most fathers have from the very start. It's like finding out your favorite restaurant was fully stocked the whole time someone just forgot to hang the open sign. Think about what it means to learn what a man is supposed to look like from someone who'd already had decades to figure it out. My grandfather wasn't performing fatherhood. He had graduated past the audition and was just living it in real time. And I got to watch every single day. He taught me things the way old men teach things, not with PowerPoints or parenting books, but with actions so quiet you don't notice you're being taught. You realize 10 years later that the reason you hold a door open, or keep your word, or apologize when you're wrong, all of that came from watching him. Now here's what nobody warns you about. Growing up without your father doesn't always feel like a wound. Sometimes it just feels like a slightly unusual house. It works fine, it's warm, and there's always someone to call when something breaks. The interesting thing about my grandfather stepping in is that he never made a spectacle of what was absent. He treated my childhood like it was completely whole. And because he treated it that way, it mostly felt that way. And that might be the most generous gift one human being can give another. Could a man in his 60s genuinely understand what a kid born decades after him needed? Somehow, and possibly, yes, because love has terrible respect for generational gaps and just barrels right through them anyway. There were hard conversations, the kind where a kid asks why his dad isn't around, and the grandfather has to steer carefully between truth and protection. My grandfather always found that lane honest enough to respect me, gentle enough to let me stay a kid a little longer. Pop culture would have you believe that father figures come with dramatic backstories. The stern coach, the wise mentor, the gruff stranger who turns it all around. Mine just drank sweet tea on the porch and asked about my day, and somehow that was more powerful than any movie version of the thing. The real industry secret of loving a child well is embarrassingly simple. You just keep showing up. No grand gesture, no perfectly scripted speech, just a consistent, warm, unmistakable presence that says, without ever saying it, that you matter enough to be here for. And then one day you grow up and you look back and you understand that what you thought was a grandparent relationship was actually something far more layered and permanent. You were being fathered the whole time, quietly, thoroughly, and without a single moment of complaint. Does it mean anything was missing? Sure. In the abstract, there's always a chapter that reads differently when a parent is gone. But when someone else writes so much warmth and wisdom into your story, the missing chapter starts to feel less like a wound and more like a detour that led somewhere unexpectedly beautiful. My grandfather is the reason I know what consistency looks like in a man. He's the reason I know that showing up on an ordinary Tuesday is more important than any grand gesture you could make on a special occasion, because life is mostly made of ordinary Tuesdays. There's a certain kind of quiet strength that old men from that generation carried. They didn't talk about their feelings in long paragraphs. They just demonstrated them in every small action until the demonstration became undeniable. My grandfather was fluent in that language, and he taught it to me without ever once calling it a lesson. So here's the honest truth at the end of all this. I never really needed to grieve the father I didn't have. because I was too busy being shaped by the one who actually showed up. And if that's not a story worth telling, then I don't know what is. The real question worth sitting with is this: how many of us were quietly raised by someone the world never gave the official title to? Someone who stepped into the frame and just stayed. Because if you look closely at the people who turned out okay, you'll almost always find one of those people somewhere in the background holding everything up.